deep in the Bitterroot Mountains. The snow had almost erased every track. Atlas was starving, frozen, and abandoned in the Bitterroot Mountains. Yet the German Shepherd refused to let the trail die.
The wind's
The
picking
search
up.
team thought they had found a victim.
Mike, how much further
Stay
do
with me,
every
Atlas.
weak
Come on,
breath
stay
from
with me.
Atlas was pulling them closer to the fugitive no one could catch.
Breathing is very shallow.
Then the truth became worse than the storm. Atlas had not been lost by accident. Someone had cut
The
him
trail
loose,
confirms the
erased
direction.
his handler,
He was injured.
and left a loyal K9 to disappear in the
The
snow.
map shows a shelter.
Stay with this story. Tell us where you're watching from. And please like and subscribe if you believe no loyal soul should be left behind. The Bitterroot Mountains did not wake gently. They rose out of the winter morning like the ribs of some ancient beast, white with snow, black with pine, and silent in a way that made every sound feel borrowed. Wind moved through the high ravines with a low, hollow voice, carrying loose powder across the slopes and laying it over yesterday's tracks like a hand trying to hide evidence. Elias Rourke stood at the edge of a frozen incline and listened. At 58, Elias had the kind of strength that did not announce itself. He stood a little over 6 feet tall, broad through the shoulders, solid in the chest, with the weathered build of a man shaped by hardship rather than vanity. His square face was browned by years of salt air, desert sun, and mountain wind. Short, dark brown hair, slightly rough on top and silvering at the temples, had been pushed back by the cold. A neatly trimmed beard shadowed his jaw, giving him the look of a man who had made peace with age, but not with weakness. He wore a plain tan military coat faded by time, a charcoal sweater beneath it, dark cargo pants, brown mountain boots, and an old black-faced military watch scratched along the left edge. He had once been a Navy SEAL. Now he was only a search and rescue consultant, or so the paperwork said. The paperwork had never known what to do with men who still heard old promises in the wind. Ahead of him, U.S. Marshal Sophia Ward lifted one gloved hand to halt the team. Sophia, 46, moved with a controlled sharpness that made even the mountains seem required to answer her. She was lean and strong, about 5'7", with warm brown skin, high cheekbones, and dark eyes that gave nothing away until she chose to speak. Her black hair was tied low at the back of her neck beneath the hood of a navy winter parka. A small mole near her right cheekbone softened her face in a way her voice rarely did. "This is the last confirmed line," Sophia said, looking down at the map in her waterproof red field notebook. Jonah Vale crossed somewhere above this ridge before the storm rolled in. Deputy Nate Harrow gave the ridge a long look. Nate was 39, solidly built without being bulky, with pale green eyes, a long face, and dark blonde hair crushed under a gray knit cap with a small blue patch sewn near the edge. His sheriff's winter coat was dusted white across the shoulders. "Of course he did," he muttered. "Criminals never run toward diners with hot coffee." No one laughed loudly, but Mara Chen's mouth twitched. Mara, 51, was small, steady, and tougher than her size suggested. Her black hair, threaded with silver, was knotted low behind her head, and the faint shadows under her eyes spoke of too many nights spent keeping wounded people alive. She carried a dark red medical field bag across her body, the small white pine patch on it already filmed with snow. Where Nate used humor to soften fear, Mara used silence. Her hands, even in gloves, looked patient. Owen Pike crouched near a break in the snow. At 64, Owen seemed carved out of the same country they were walking through. Lean, weather-bent, quiet, with pale gray eyes, a hooked nose, and silver hair tucked under an old brown fur-lined hat. A waxed canvas coat hung from his narrow frame. Around his neck rested a pair of battered brass binoculars on a worn leather strap. "Hold up," Owen said. The group stilled. The tracks were half covered, but not gone. Owen brushed snow away with 2 fingers. "Dog," Nate said. Owen did not look up, not just a dog. Elias moved closer. The prints were large, deep, and deliberate. A heavy animal, strong chest, long stride, not a wolf, not a wandering farm dog. The paws had cut into the snow with purpose, then shifted toward a ridge where the wind would carry scent cleanly between the pines. "A German Shepherd," Owen said. "Big male, I'd say. But look here." Sophia stepped beside him. "What am I looking at?" "Not panic." Owen pointed to the line of tracks. No circling, no scavenging, no wandering. He avoided the soft drift there, crossed the packed crust here, then moved into the wind. That dog was working. A strange quiet fell over the team. Elias felt something old stir beneath his ribs. A working dog alone in these mountains was not a loose end. It was a warning. They followed the paw prints north. The forest thickened as the slope steepened. Pines stood shoulder to shoulder, their branches sagging under white weight. Every few minutes, the wind shook snow loose from the high boughs, and it fell in pale curtains around them. The world narrowed to breath, footsteps, radio static, and the steady line of tracks leading through the trees. Then the tracks changed. They had been firm at first. Now one paw dragged slightly. Then another print went shallow. The animal had stumbled there, recovered, continued. Mara saw it too. He's hurt. Or starving, Owen said. Nate's jaw tightened. Please tell me there is a cheerful explanation. Elias looked ahead into the timber. There isn't. A faint sound came from the ridge above them. Not a bark, not a growl. A dry, broken breath. Sophia raised a hand again. Slow, nobody rushes him. They climbed another 30 yards. At first, Atlas looked like part of the mountain. He stood on a low shelf of stone beneath a leaning pine, black and gold against the white world, large but terribly reduced by hunger and cold. Atlas was a 6-year-old male German shepherd, deep-chested and broad-headed, with a once thick coat of black and burnt gold now clumped with snow. A dark saddle ran from his shoulders toward his tail, while his chest and front legs held a pale golden cream beneath the ice. His muzzle was black, wide, and noble. A faint golden mark like a crooked little lightning bolt lay off-center on his forehead. His left ear stood sharp, the right ear bent slightly at the tip from an old healed injury. A torn charcoal K9 harness hung too loose around his ribs, and a scratched metal tag rested against his chest. Atlas, K9A17. He did not run to them. He did not whine. He stood with his nose angled north, body trembling so hard the loose straps of his harness quivered. His amber eyes were sunken with exhaustion, but they remained awake, watchful, disciplined, almost ashamed to be seen weak. Mara inhaled sharply. Oh, God. Elias felt the words hit him before he could answer. The dog was freezing, starving, near the edge. But there was something worse than suffering in that posture. Atlas was still on duty. Sophia's voice lowered. Elias, I see him. Can you approach? I can try. Try slowly. Elias took one step forward, then another. He kept his shoulders relaxed, his gaze low, his hands visible. He did not call Atlas a good boy. Not yet. Praise could sound like pity to a creature, still holding the last wall of its dignity upright. The German shepherd watched him. A low sound rolled in Atlas's throat. Not strong enough to be a threat, not weak enough to be surrender. Elias stopped 10 feet away and crouched. Snow pressed cold through his pants. His knees complained, but his voice remained calm. Easy, Atlas. The dog's eyes flicked toward him at the sound of the name. Behind Elias, Nate whispered, He knows. Elias did not turn. Of course he knows. Atlas lowered his head an inch, sniffed the air, then looked past Elias again. North, always north. And there, in that small, stubborn movement, the mountain seemed to open a door no one had known was there. Atlas was not asking to be saved first. He was asking whether they understood the direction. For one brief second, Elias felt the cold vanish. He remembered another place, another ridge, another wounded teammate, pointing with 2 fingers, because speech had already become too expensive. He remembered arriving late. He remembered the kind of silence that followed a promise broken by time. Atlas looked at him not like a dog begging for rescue, but like a soldier handing over an unfinished oath. That was the moment Elias knew this was not only a search for Jonah Vale. Something had been left behind in these mountains. Something loyal, something betrayed. And it had dragged itself through snow to make sure the truth still had a trail. Elias, Mara said gently. He's going to collapse. Atlas tried to move before Elias could answer. One step, his front paw sank. A second step, his hind leg trembled and nearly folded. The team froze, held in place by the terrible dignity of watching a brave thing fail slowly. Atlas, Elias said, firmer now. Hold. The German shepherd turned his head, his eyes fixed on Elias, not trusting, not pleading, measuring. Elias touched the old black-faced watch on his wrist, the one he had carried through storms, deserts, ships, funerals, and years of trying to become ordinary. He did not remove it yet. He only let Atlas see his hand rest there. I'm not taking it from you, Elias said softly. I see the direction. Atlas stared at him. For a heartbeat, the only sound was wind moving through pine needles like distant surf. Then Atlas tried to lift his nose once more toward the northern trail. His body gave out. He dropped hard into the snow, legs folding beneath him, head striking the white crust with a soft, awful sound. Mara moved, but Sophia caught her sleeve. Slow, Sophia warned, though her own face had changed. Elias was already on his knees. Atlas was still conscious. Barely. The German shepherd's amber eyes had clouded, but his muzzle remained pointed north. Even now, even lying in the snow with his breath coming shallow and uneven, he had arranged his failing body toward the scent he had refused to abandon. Elias crawled closer. He placed one gloved hand on the snow, palm open, not touching Atlas yet. Easy, he whispered. You did enough to be heard. Atlas's right ear twitched. Mara came in carefully from the side, lowering herself with the patience of someone approaching, both a patient and a wounded pride. Sophia kept the others back. Nate swallowed hard and looked away for half a second, as if the sight had found a place in him he preferred to keep locked. Owen removed his hat, not from habit, but from respect. Elias finally rested 2 fingers near the torn edge of Atlas's harness. The dog did not bite, did not pull away. His eyes stayed on Elias. There was no trust there yet, only exhaustion and a question. Elias leaned closer, feeling the cold breath of the animal against his glove. "I see it, soldier," he said, his voice so low the wind nearly stole it. "I see the way you're pointing." Atlas's eyes fluttered. Elias looked north, past the trees, past the ridge, toward whatever shadow Jonah Vale had carried into the mountains. Then he looked back at the fallen German shepherd. "We'll follow it," he said. "But first we bring you back." Atlas did not answer. He could not. But before his eyes closed, his nose shifted one final inch toward the northern trail. Elias bowed his head beside him. "I see it, Atlas," he whispered. "I see the direction you're showing." Mara Chen reached Atlas first, but she did not touch him the way frightened people touch wounded animals. She lowered herself beside the fallen German shepherd, with the patience of someone who knew pain had its own language. Snow gathered on the shoulders of her dark red field jacket. Her black hair, streaked with silver and pinned into a low knot, had loosened in the wind, but her hands stayed steady. Mara had seen men scream, pray, curse, and go silent under injury. What she saw in Atlas was different. The dog was not surrendering to pain. He was trying to keep command of himself while his body betrayed him. "Respiration shallow," Mara said. "Cold stress, likely dehydration, possible starvation." Deputy Nate Harrow dropped to one knee a few yards back and pulled a folded emergency tarp from his pack. His gray knit cap sat crooked over his dark blonde hair, and the little blue patch at the edge had iced over. Nate's humor had vanished for the moment, leaving behind a local lawman with pale green eyes and a jaw set hard against what he was seeing. "Tell me where you want it," he said. "Windward side," Mara answered. "Anchor it against that rock." Owen Pike was already moving. The old tracker placed small orange markers beside the paw prints and boot impressions around the site. His thin body bent into the storm as if the mountain had been trying to fold him for 64 years and had still not succeeded. He wore his brown fur-lined hat low, his pale eyes sweeping the snow with reverence. "Don't step across his trail," Owen warned. "Whatever he followed, we may need to read it." U.S. Marshal Sophia Ward stood above them, one hand on her radio, the other holding her waterproof red notebook against her navy parka. Sophia looked composed, but Elias saw the change in her mouth. The line had tightened. She had expected a fugitive's trail, maybe a body, maybe an ambush. She had not expected a dying K9 still angled toward a scent no one else could see. "Dispatch, this is Ward," Sophia said into the radio. "I need a K9 identification check. Tag reads Atlas, K9A17. Possible federal support animal attached to prior Vale operation. Also patch me through to Dr. Becker Rowan at the K9 recovery station." Static cracked. Elias remained kneeling beside Atlas. His tan military coat brushed the snow. He kept one gloved hand near the torn harness, not restraining, not claiming. Atlas's eyes had half closed, but the dog's black muzzle still moved faintly, gathering scent from the north wind even while his ribs trembled. "Still working," Elias murmured. Mara glanced at him. "He's barely conscious." "I know." "That wasn't a compliment, Elias. It wasn't meant as one." Mara opened her field bag and worked with quick restraint, choosing warmth before anything else. She slid a thermal blanket beneath the dog's shoulder with care, then paused each time Atlas's lips twitched or his throat gave a warning rumble. She did not take the sound personally. A wounded soldier could curse the medic and still be asking to live. The radio hissed again. Then a woman's voice came through, warm but brisk, with the clean authority of someone used to being obeyed by frightened owners, stubborn handlers, and dogs who trusted actions more than words. "This is Dr. Becca Rowan. Who's with the dog?" Mara pressed the handset close. "Marichin, former field medic. We have a male German Shepherd K9, severe exhaustion, cold exposure, responsive but guarded. He collapsed after attempting movement. Becca Rowan was 52, though only her voice reached the mountain at first. Mara knew her from regional rescue work, a sturdy woman with copper-red hair cut to her jaw, pale blue eyes behind thin-framed glasses, and a teal veterinary coat that always seemed to carry the smell of antiseptic, dog fur, and black coffee. Becca had a softness in how she spoke to animals and a blade in how she spoke to people who failed them. "Do not force him up," Becca said. "Do not crowd his head. Warmth first, small amounts only when he can swallow cleanly. No heroic feeding, no rough restraint unless he becomes a danger to himself." "He still has task fixation," Mara said. "I heard who you found," Becca replied, and for the first time her voice lowered. "Atlas was not a pet. Treat him like a K9 who still believes he is under order." Elias looked down at the German Shepherd. Atlas's left ear twitched at the sound of his name. The dog was 6 years old enough to be seasoned, young enough that strength should still have lived richly in his bones. Beneath the snow and hunger, there was a powerful animal. Deep chest, broad head, thick black and gold coat, dark saddle over his back, cream gold legs, black muzzle, and that faint crooked mark of gold on his forehead, like a small lightning scar painted by God's unsteady hand. The right ear folded slightly at the tip from some old injury, giving him one imperfection that made him feel more alive than any perfect breed portrait could. Sophia's radio gave another burst. Marshal Ward, dispatch said. Rickard located. Atlas K9A17 attached to contracted tracking support during the Veil pursuit. Handler listed as Clay Mercer. Status of K9 marked lost in storm. Handler status unresolved. Sophia's eyes narrowed. Define unresolved. Report states Mercer separated from team during whiteout. Search suspended due to weather. Who filed the report? A pause. Derek Sloan, Gray Line Response Field Lead. Nate looked up from tying down the tarp. That name mean anything good? Sophia did not answer immediately. Elias noticed that. Sophia Ward was a woman who respected facts too much to insult them with quick emotion, but something about the report had landed wrong. Send the file to my device, she said. Full version, not the summary. Copy. Mara, following Becca's instructions, eased a folded blanket over Atlas's back. Atlas's eyes opened. The amber gaze did not go to Mara first. It went to the north, again. That small movement seemed to make the cold deeper. Nate whispered, he's still thinking about it. Owen, from the edge of the marked trail, had gone still. He was looking not at Atlas, but at a shallow scrape in the snow where the dog's paw had dragged before collapse. No, Owen said quietly. Not thinking, remembering. The words hung there. Atlas drew in a thin breath. His nose moved, slow and deliberate. Then, with effort so painful it made Mara freeze, he shifted his head a few inches, not toward food, not toward warmth, but toward Owen's boot. Owen looked down. His boot had landed near an older impression, almost hidden under blown powder. Elias saw it then. A second layer beneath the dog's trail. Human, deep on the left side, uneven, someone limping or carrying weight. Sophia saw Elias's face change. What? Elias did not touch the print. Atlas isn't reacting to the wind now. He's reacting to where Owen stepped. Owen lifted his boot carefully away. Beneath it, the broken edge of the human track showed through. Nate exhaled. So even half frozen, this dog just corrected us. No one laughed. Atlas's eyes fluttered. For a moment, the whole mountain seemed to lean closer. There was no holy light, no voice from the sky, no miracle anyone could prove. Only a starving German shepherd, too weak to rise, using the last scraps of awareness to guard a trail from being ruined. Yet to Elias, it felt like judgment had passed silently through the trees. Not angry judgment. Older than that, the kind that asked whether human beings still deserved the loyalty animals gave them. Mara swallowed. Atlas, you stubborn old soul. He's not old, Becca said through the radio, having heard enough to understand, but he may have been carrying an old kind of duty. Elias closed his eyes for half a second. He had known men like that. Young faces under old burdens. Boys who became statues before they learned how to be afraid. Atlas wore the same look, though no dog should have had to. Mara prepared a small portion of softened food from the emergency kit. She placed it near Atlas's muzzle. Atlas sniffed once, then he turned away. Not far, just enough to refuse. Mara frowned. He needs calories. He thinks stopping means failing, Elias said. Sophia looked up from the file now glowing on her device. We are not making a dying dog finish a pursuit. No, Elias said. We are asking him to live long enough to let us understand what he already found. The distinction mattered. Sophia heard it. Mara heard it. Even Nate, who had been tightening the tarp rope with unnecessary force, slowed. Elias shifted closer, still careful, still low. His voice changed. Not louder, not softer, but more certain. It was not the voice of a man begging. It was the voice of someone placing order inside chaos. Atlas. The German shepherd's eyes moved to him. Eat. Atlas stared. The wind pressed against the tarp. Snow whispered over stone. Mara held the food but did not push it forward. Sophia stood with the incomplete report in her hand. Owen watched the trail. Nate held his breath like a man waiting for a verdict. Atlas lowered his muzzle. He took one small mouthful. Mara's shoulders dropped with relief so slight, only Elias noticed. Nate covered his own relief by pretending to inspect the tarp knot. Well, Nate said, voice rougher than he meant it to be, I guess that means we've been hired as temporary kitchen staff. Mara almost smiled. Try not to get fired. Atlas swallowed with effort. Then his eyes drifted toward Elias again. There was no affection there yet, no trust. But the first wall had cracked, not fallen. Atlas was too proud, too hurt, and too disciplined for that, but cracked. Sophia stepped beside Elias and handed him her device. The report on the screen was brief, too brief. Lines of sterile language described bad weather, lost contact, failed recovery attempts. Atlas reduced to an asset. Clay Mercer reduced to a missing handler. No mention of the K9's last known scent line. No explanation for why a trained dog's tracker had not been recovered. No witness statements from the final ridge. Clay Mercer's photo sat beside his name, 47, lean and sharp-faced, with tired gray-brown eyes, cropped light brown hair, and the guarded gentleness of a man who had spent more time earning dogs' trust than impressing people. In the picture, he wore a faded green K9 training jacket and a black paracord bracelet on his right wrist. Elias looked from the photo to Atlas. "Does the dog know that name?" Sophia asked. Mara repeated it softly, almost without meaning to. "Clay Mercer." Atlas's ears rose. Not much, but enough. His eyes opened wider, and a sound came from his chest. Not a growl this time. Not a whine either. It was lower, stranger, a broken note pulled from somewhere deeper than training. Mara froze. Nate's face lost all humor. Owen murmured, "There it is." Sophia slowly took the device back. Whatever doubt she had been holding hardened into something cleaner and more dangerous. "That report is missing too much," she said. Elias kept his gaze on Atlas. The German shepherd had eaten only a mouthful. His body was still in danger. His breathing remained fragile. The mountains still had teeth around them, but now the shape of the mystery had changed. Atlas had not merely survived long enough to be found. He had survived long enough to object. Sophia looked at the short file again, then toward the northern trail marked by snow, paw prints, and one nearly ruined human track. "Somebody wrote this report to close the case," she said. "Not to tell the truth." Sophia Ward did not move the team forward until Atlas had been secured from the wind. That decision, simple as it sounded, changed the shape of the morning. Before Atlas, the mountain had been a pursuit. After Atlas, it became an investigation. The difference mattered. A pursuit chased what was running. An investigation listened to what had been left behind. Mara, Chen, stayed beside Atlas beneath the emergency tarp, one knee pressed into the snow, her dark red medical bag open near her boot. The German shepherd lay wrapped in thermal layers, his black and gold coat dulled by frost, his broad chest rising and falling with shallow but steadier breaths. His eyes did not fully close. Every few minutes, the amber gaze drifted toward the northern timber, as if sleep itself had to ask permission from duty. "Becca says we keep him still," Mara said, glancing up from the radio handset. "No walking, no testing his drive, no proving how tough he is." Deputy Nate Harrow tightened the last rope on the tarp and gave Atlas a concerned look. "For the record, I already believe he's tougher than everyone here." Owen Pike grunted. "Not everyone." Nate looked at the old tracker. "Owen, you once complained because motel coffee was too hot. Coffee should respect a man's mouth." Mara almost smiled, but the softness vanished when Atlas shifted under the blanket. She laid a careful hand near his shoulder, not holding him down, only reminding him that something warm and living was still nearby. Sophia stood a few yards away with the downloaded report open on her device. Snow dotted the screen. Her dark eyes moved line by line, and with each line her expression grew less satisfied. The report was clean. Too clean. Men and women who had worked real disappearances knew that truth rarely arrived in neat paragraphs. Truth came muddy, contradictory, half-frozen, and full of unanswered questions. Elias Rourke watched her read. "What's missing?" he asked. Sophia did not look up. "Everything that matters." She turned the screen toward him. There was a photograph attached to the final field report. Derek Sloan, Gray Line Response Field Lead, age 49. It was an official picture, taken indoors under cold lighting. Derek was tall, broad-shouldered, and rigidly neat, with a rectangular face, pale skin, steel blue eyes, and gray-blonde hair cut so precisely it looked more engineered than trimmed. His face was clean-shaven, his mouth flat, and his black tactical jacket showed no dirt, no weather, no sign that he belonged to the same wilderness he had written about. He had the look of a man who trusted documents more than witnesses, because documents could be controlled. Derek Sloan filed the last position update, Sophia said. He marked Atlas as lost during whiteout conditions. Clay Mercer separated from team. Search suspended. Elias read the lines once, then again. No last known scent line, he said. No recovery grid. No tracker ping history. No handler statement, Sophia added, because Mercer was already missing. Owen had walked back to the paw prints, placing his boots with the care of a priest crossing a sanctuary. He crouched near the place where Atlas's stride had first begun to fail. "You two may want to see this." Elias and Sophia joined him. The trail told its story in degrees of weakness. At the upper slope, Atlas's paw prints were deep and balanced, the prints of a powerful dog moving with training and intention. 30 yards farther, the left rear paw had dragged once, then twice. Farther on, the front prints had widened where Atlas had braced himself against a stumble. None of it looked random. The German shepherd had corrected himself each time and kept moving along the line of scent. Owen pointed with a gloved finger. He stopped here. There was a shallow hollow beneath a pine root. Snow had drifted over it, but the outline remained. the place where Atlas had folded his body into a windbreak for a short rest. Not long, Owen said. He didn't curl fully, kept his head pointed downhill. Nate came closer, staying outside the markers. How can you tell that? Owen tapped a crescent mark in the snow, muzzle impression. His head was here, body there. Even resting, he faced the direction of travel. No one spoke for several seconds. Elias imagined the dog alone in the dark, ribs tight with hunger, wind moving over his back, head still angled toward a fugitive's path because the last order had not been released. Atlas had not understood betrayal as men understood it. He had only understood absence, Clay gone, team gone, command gone, scent still present. So he followed the only thing that had not abandoned its meaning. Mara called from beneath the tarp, Elias. He turned. Atlas had lifted his head barely an inch, not toward the team, toward the trail. The movement trembled through his neck and failed, but his eyes remained fixed. He's hearing us talk about it, Mara said. Or smelling what we uncovered, Owen replied. Sophia looked at Atlas, then back to the tracks. We document. We do not move him. Agreed, Elias said. They worked outward from the collapse site. Owen found the first human sign near a cluster of stones, a boot mark with a heavier left edge. Jonah Vale, or whoever had passed there, had been favoring one side. The print had partially iced over, old but not ancient. Beside it lay a torn strip of black fabric caught on a broken branch. Nate photographed it and placed it in a paper evidence sleeve. Farther down, they found the remains of a small fire hidden between rocks. Not a campfire for warmth, a careful fire. Low flame, little smoke, shielded from view. Owen sifted the cold ash with a twig and uncovered part of a military-style ration wrapper. Jonah was here, Sophia said. Or someone helping him, Nate answered. Sophia looked at him sharply. Nate raised one hand. Just saying what the snow's saying. Elias studied the fire pit. The stones had been replaced after use. Someone had tried to erase heat, light, and presence, but there were always things men forgot. A melted bead of plastic, a heel twist near the edge, a snapped twig above shoulder height, where someone tall had turned too quickly with a pack. The mountain did not accuse loudly. It simply remembered. Afra joined them briefly after confirming Atlas was stable enough to be watched from a few yards away. She crouched near the torn harness strap Elias had loosened earlier and examined the attachment point under better light. Her face changed. Elias. He came to her side. Mara held part of the harness between two fingers. This wasn't torn. Sophia knelt beside them. Show me. The strap near the tracker mount had a clean diagonal cut through the webbing. The edges were not frayed like weather damage, not chewed, not ripped against rock. It was the kind of cut made by a sharp blade in one deliberate motion. Mara's voice went quiet. Becca said the tracker couldn't just fall off. Sophia turned on the radio. Dr. Rowan, this is Ward. We have a clean cut through the K9 harness at the tracker mount. No fraying, no chew marks. Becca's answer came through after a burst of static. Then someone removed it. The words did not rise. They fell. Nate looked toward Atlas. His humor was gone again. Someone cut him loose from the only thing that could bring help. Elias stared at the strap. For a moment, he did not see the mountain. He saw a hand, a knife, a dog waiting, because dogs trusted hands they recognized until those hands taught them not to. He saw Atlas standing obediently while someone took away the one signal that might have saved him. And in that imagined obedience, Elias felt something inside him go cold. Not all cruelty wore rage. Some cruelty wore procedure, spoke calmly, filled out forms, and walked away before the body hit the snow. Atlas made a sound behind them. Not loud. A rough breath, almost a cough. They turned. The German shepherd had raised his head again. His eyes were not on the food near Mara's knee. They were not on the blanket, or the fireless shelter, or the people trying to save him. They were fixed on the cut strap in Mara's hand. The sight of it changed the air. Atlas knew. Perhaps not as humans knew, not with dates and names and filed complaints, but somewhere in that injured mind, the cut was not an object. It was a memory. The moment the world had gone silent, the moment the voices left, the moment the pack disappeared and the mountain became the only witness. The dog had not merely lost his way. Someone had removed the road home. Sophia slowly closed her notebook. Photograph it from every angle, she said. Nate nodded and lifted the camera. Owen looked north, following the broken rhythm of the trail. Jonah's tracks continued beyond the fire pit. Dog followed after the tracker was removed. Alone? Mara asked. Owen's jaw tightened. Looks that way. Sophia checked the file again. Derek Sloan reported Atlas missing before the final search window closed. If this cut happened before that, he lied. If he knew after, he still buried it. Either way, Nate said, not an accident. Elias walked back to Atlas and knelt beside him. The German shepherd's strength had ebbed after the effort of lifting his head. His breathing was thin again, but his eyes stayed awake. You saw the strap, Elias said. Atlas blinked slowly. Elias did not pretend the dog understood every word, but he believed, in the way old soldiers believed in unspoken things, that Atlas understood tone. He understood presence. He understood whether a man came to command, pity, or stand guard. Elias lowered his voice. Clay Mercer. The effect was immediate. Atlas's ears moved. The left rose fully. The folded right tried. His amber eyes sharpened through exhaustion, and his front paw pressed once against the snow beneath the blanket, as if some buried command had reached him through the pain. Mara covered her mouth for a moment. Sophia watched with a stillness that was almost grief. Elias repeated the name, softer this time. Clay. Atlas made that same low sound from the previous ridge, but now Elias heard it differently. It was not only recognition, it was not only longing, it was direction. Owen, standing at the trail edge, looked from Atlas to the northern timber. He's not only following Jonah, Owen said. No, Elias replied. Sophia looked at him. What are you saying? Elias rested his hand near Atlas's shoulder, close enough for warmth, but not pressure. I'm saying Clay Mercer isn't just a missing handler in this dog's head. Clay is the reason he didn't stop. Snow moved through the trees in pale sheets. The evidence lay around them. The hidden fire, the uneven boot print, the ration wrapper, the cut harness. The dog who reacted to a name like it had been carved into his bones. Sophia looked again at Derek Sloan's report. This time, her face had no softness left. Then we treat this as more than a fugitive trail, she said. We treat it as a compromised operation. Nate gave a slow nod. About time the paperwork caught up with the dog. Mara stayed beside Atlas, her gloved hand resting lightly on the edge of the blanket. He needs rest. He'll get it, Elias said. Then he leaned closer. Close enough that Atlas could hear him beneath the wind. If Clay is still out there, Elias whispered, we'll find him, and if someone left you behind, we'll find that too. Atlas's eyes remained open for one more breath. Then, as if the words had placed a small stone beneath the weight he had been carrying, the German shepherd let his head sink back into the blanket. For the first time since they had found him, his nose did not strain farther north, not because the trail no longer mattered, because someone else had finally agreed to carry part of it. Owen Pike found a camp by listening to what the forest refused to repeat. Not sound, not movement, absence. He stood beneath a row of old pines, his weathered face tilted slightly. Pale eyes moving across the snow the way a preacher might read, a page of scripture worn thin by many hands. Around him, the bitterroot wilderness held its breath. Wind moved through the needles overhead, but the snow below one cluster of branches lay strangely flat, too smooth, too deliberate. Owen raised one hand. Sophia Ward stopped at once. Nate Harrow stopped behind her. Elias Rourke halted beside the stretcher where Atlas lay wrapped under thermal layers. Mara Chen knelt beside the German shepherd, one hand near his shoulder, watching the old tracker with the fierce attention of someone who knew a single wrong step could cost them evidence. What do you see? Sophia asked. Owen did not answer immediately. He moved 3 paces left, then crouched. His waxed brown coat creaked in the cold. He brushed loose powder from a low branch and revealed a thin cord tied close to the bark. Someone pulled branches down to break the outline, he said. Not a hunter's blind. Too careful. Nate looked toward the dark space beneath the trees. A camp, a hidden one. Sophia's face hardened into command. Nobody enters until we mark the perimeter. That was Sophia's gift and burden. She could stand in a place heavy with anger and still remember procedure. Her navy parka was dusted white, her black hair tucked tight beneath the hood, her red field notebook already open. She did not treat the scene like a chance for revenge. She treated it like a witness, and witnesses, she believed, deserved not to be trampled. Owen marked the outer line. Nate photographed the approach. Elias stayed back with Mara and Atlas, though every part of him wanted to step into the shadowed place and read it for himself. Atlas was awake again, barely. The 6-year-old German shepherd lay with his black muzzle resting on the edge of the blanket. Snow crystals clung to the gold fur along his brow, including the crooked little lightning-shaped mark above his left eye. The tip of his right ear, folded from an old injury, trembled whenever the wind shifted. He was still too weak to rise, but something in the camp smell had reached him. His eyes had changed, not sharpened like before, darkened. Mara noticed. He knows this place. Elias did not answer. He had already seen it. Atlas was not pulling toward the camp with task drive alone. His breathing had altered, becoming shallow, uneven, almost restrained, as if the scent beneath those pines was not only familiar but painful. Sophia entered first, careful with each step. The hidden camp lay under a roof of old pine limbs weighted with snow. A camouflage net, dark green and stiff with frost, sagged between 2 trunks. Beneath it sat the remains of a small fire pit, covered with dirt and ash. 2 empty food cans lay half buried near a stone. A folded waterproof map had been shoved under a root. A length of black cord hung from a branch where something had once been tied. Nate photographed the fire pit. This wasn't built by someone panicking. No, Sophia said. Someone rested here and planned the next move. Owen examined the ground near the trunk. More than one person passed through. Jonah's uneven boot is here, but there are at least two other sets. One heavier, one lighter. Elias looked toward Sophia. Gray line? Possibly, she said. We proved before we named. It was the kind of sentence Elias respected, even when impatience burned under his ribs. Mara brought Atlas no closer than the perimeter at first. She would not risk the dog's fragile condition for evidence. But when the wind shifted through the camp, Atlas lifted his head with a suddenness that made her catch the blanket. Easy, Mara whispered. Atlas's nostrils flared. Then he made a sound, not the low warning from the ridge, not the strained note from the name Clay Mercer. This was quieter, almost swallowed before it escaped. A sound of recognition so old and wounded that Nate lowered his camera without meaning to. Sophia heard it too. What did he smell? Owen followed the line of Atlas's nose toward the base of a split pine. He brushed aside a layer of needles with a stick. Something black showed beneath. Marshall. Sophia crouched beside him. The object was a smashed K9 tracker, its casing cracked, its small light dead. The metal clip had been bent backward with force. Beside it lay a short piece of leash, cut clean at one end and stained dark with weather and pine sap. Mara closed her eyes for one breath. Nate's voice came low. They didn't just remove his signal. Sophia gave him a warning look, but the warning held no real heat. She was thinking the same thing. Elias stared at the broken tracker. That small dead object seemed louder than any confession. Men had stood here. Men had made choices. They had taken a trained dog, a living partner, a creature built by loyalty, and reduced him to a liability. The camp did not feel abandoned anymore. It felt accused. Sophia placed evidence markers beside the tracker and leash. Photograph first, bag separately. Chain of custody starts here. Nate obeyed, hands steadier than his face. Owen continued searching near the pine roots. His fingers paused on a piece of fabric frozen into the snow. He worked it free slowly, breath fogging around his silver beard. When the cloth came loose, he turned it over. A name patch. Mercer. For a moment, none of them moved. The letters were faded but readable, stitched in dark thread on olive fabric. The edges were torn, as if the patch had been ripped from a jacket or gear bag. A few pale dog hairs clung to one corner, caught in the weave and preserved by cold. Sophia's expression did not change much, but her hand tightened around her pen. Elias felt the mountain tilt. Bring it where Atlas can smell, he said. Mara gave him a sharp look. Elias, not close enough to agitate him, just downwind. Sophia considered, then nodded once, carefully. We document the reaction, but we don't force anything. Owen held the patch a few feet away, low to the snow, letting the wind carry what remained of its scent. Atlas lifted his head. This time, the movement did not look like duty. It looked like grief remembering the shape of a door. His amber eyes locked on the patch. His broad chest shuddered beneath the blanket. He tried to push one front paw forward, failed, then tried again. Mara steadied the blanket but did not restrain him. Atlas stretched his paw until it touched the snow between him and the patch. Then the German shepherd did something none of them expected. He pressed that paw down. Not toward the trail, not toward the camp. Over the empty space between himself and Clay Mercer's name, as if he were holding something in place so the world could not take it again. No one spoke. A broken dog, too weak to stand, guarding a torn name as though a man's soul might blow away if Atlas let go. Mara wiped at her cheek with the back of her glove and pretended it was snow. Nate looked down, jaw working. That's his handler. Sophia's voice was steady but softer than before. It appears likely. Likely, Nate repeated. Sophia finally looked at him. Likely is the word that survives in court. Elias admired her for that. Compassion could find a grave. Evidence could open it. Sophia's radio crackled. Ward, command has additional gray line file fragments. Derek Sloan's supplemental report states, Mercer may have abandoned position during low visibility conditions. Owen made a sound like a curse without words. Sophia answered, send it. The file came through in pieces. Derek Sloan had written that Clay Mercer became separated after disregarding team regroup protocol. He had written that Atlas disappeared during the same weather event. He had written that recovery was not feasible due to operational risk. Clean words, convenient words, words that stood far from this cold camp where a tracker lay broken and a dog still guarded a torn patch. Elias looked toward the map under the root. What did Jonah take from here? Owen unfolded the waterproof sheet under Sophia's direction. Lines had been marked in red and black grease pencil, not enough to be useful without context, but enough to show direction, pauses, and a route skirting the exposed ridge. Nate pointed to one area. Black elk drainage. Maybe, Owen said, but don't marry the first answer. Sophia photographed the map before touching it further. This camp connects Jonah, Atlas, and Mercer. It also contradicts Sloane's report. Mara looked at Atlas, and Atlas knew. Elias knelt beside the German shepherd. The dog's head had sunk again, exhausted by the small effort of reaching toward the patch. His eyes remained half open, fixed not on the tracker, not on the leash, but on the fabric bearing Mercer's name. There was no way to explain loyalty like that to a report. A report could say K9 asset. It could say missing. It could say weather event. It could say search suspended. It could not say that a dog remembered the scent of the man who had taught him how to trust the world. Elias placed his hand near Atlas's shoulder, not touching the wound of pride beneath the fur, only offering warmth. You found him here, didn't you? Elias said quietly. Or you tried. Atlas's eyes flicked toward him. Sophia came over with the sealed evidence bag containing the patch. We have enough to reclassify the earlier operation as compromised. Nate gave a grim nod. That's polite language for someone lied. It is language that lets us keep digging, Sophia said. Owen looked deeper into the trees beyond the camp. Trail continues north after this point. Jonah left in a hurry. The others didn't follow far, or they used a cleaner path. Derek's people? Mara asked. Sophia did not answer with certainty. She would not give suspicion the dignity of fact before it earned it. But her silence was enough. Wind moved through the hidden camp, lifting powder from the broken tracker, the cut leash, the disturbed ash, the torn name. The pines above them groaned softly, and for a moment Elias imagined the trees had been waiting for someone to come who could read what they had kept safe beneath snow. He leaned closer to Atlas. You held it long enough, he said. From here, we carry it with you. Atlas did not rise, he could not, but his paw relaxed against the snow, and the torn patch with Mercer's name, now sealed in evidence, no longer belonged to the mountain alone. The storm did not arrive like weather. It arrived like a verdict. One moment, the hidden camp beneath the pines still held its shape, the broken tracker sealed in evidence, the torn leash photographed, the Mercer name patch packed away in Sophia Ward's red notebook case. The next, the sky folded inward. Wind came down through the bitterroot trees with a hard white roar, shaking snow from the branches and turning the air into a wall. Sophia looked once toward the northern timber, where Jonas Avail's trail continued into darkness. Then she looked at Atlas. Movement stops here, she said. No one argued. Deputy Nate Harrow drove stakes into the frozen ground, while Owen Pike pulled canvas from his pack and tied it between two low pines and a shoulder of rock. The old tracker's hands moved slowly but without waste, as if he had made shelter in worse places and had no desire to impress anyone by saying so. Mara Chin worked beside Atlas, her dark red medical field bag open in the snow. Her face was calm, but her eyes had sharpened with the look of someone counting breaths. Atlas lay under thermal blankets, a great German shepherd reduced by cold and hunger into a trembling silhouette of black and gold. His broad head rested low. The crooked gold mark on his forehead was nearly hidden beneath frost. His right ear, the one with the folded tip, twitched once whenever the wind slapped the canvas. Elias Rourke knelt close, his faded tan military coat gathering snow along the sleeves. He kept himself lower than Atlas's eyes, not towering, not commanding. His square jaw was tight beneath his trimmed beard, and the cold had darkened the weathered skin across his cheekbones. But his voice remained even. Stay with us, he said quietly. Mara pressed the radio handset close. Becca, he's weaker. Still responsive, but slipping. We have shelter, limited heat, no transport until the wind drops. Dr. Becca Rowan's voice came through broken static, warm but urgent. Reduce stimulation. Keep him insulated from the ground. Do not force food. Small water only if he can manage it. Mara, watch his breathing. Elias, if he trusts your position, stay there. Don't crowd him, but don't leave him searching for a familiar anchor. Nate, tightening the last rope, glanced over. A familiar anchor. That sounds fancier than old guy sitting in the snow. Mara gave him a tired look. Nate, what? I'm saying he's doing great. Very anchor-like. Even Sophia's mouth softened for half a second. But the storm swallowed the moment. The shelter held, barely. Canvas snapped. Snow hissed across the ground. Beyond the narrow ring of their lamps, the forest vanished into white noise. The world had shrunk to 6 people, 1 wounded dog, and the evidence of a betrayal packed carefully in waterproof bags. Sophia stood at the entrance of the shelter with her red notebook tucked inside her parka. Usually, she seemed made of order, exact words, exact steps, exact lines between authority and emotion. But now her gaze kept returning to Atlas. A file had called him lost. A man had called him an asset. The mountain had nearly made him a ghost. Yet here he was, breathing against the storm, still carrying more truth than the report ever had. Marshal, Nate said softly, we still calling command. When the signal steadies, Sophia looked out into the white. Right now, we keep this scene intact and keep Atlas alive. Elias heard the change. Sophia had not said the dog. She had said Atlas. Mara slipped a folded pad beneath Atlas's chest to lift him away from the frozen ground. The German shepherd stirred. His lips tightened. A faint warning moved through his throat, weaker than before but still proud. Easy, Mara whispered. No one is taking anything from you. Atlas did not settle. His amber eyes opened, unfocused and troubled. He tried to lift his head, but the effort failed. His breathing quickened. Something in him was not only fighting cold, it was fighting helplessness. Elias understood that kind of panic. The body trapped, the mind still on mission. The shame of needing hands after years of being the hand that reached for others. He slowly removed his glove. Mara saw him. Elias, your hand will freeze. Not yet. From his wrist, Elias unfastened the old black-faced military watch. The strap was olive fabric darkened with years of sweat, rain, salt, smoke, and places no one at home ever asked about correctly. The metal rim was scratched along the left edge. It had marked time through deployments, funerals, hospital rooms, and silent mornings when Elias had woken with names in his mouth. He had not spoken aloud in years. He placed the watch on the blanket near Atlas's muzzle, not touching him, only offering. Atlas's nostrils moved. The German shepherd drew in the scent once, then again. His eyes shifted toward Elias. The faint sound in his throat faded, not because his pain had ended, but because some part of him recognized the shape of service in that smell. Leather, metal, weather, human fear disciplined into duty. A soldier's scent, old and worn but not false. The storm hammered the canvas. Atlas kept breathing. Then his nose touched the edge of the watch. Mara saw it and went still. Elias leaned closer, his voice barely above the wind. That's mine. Carried it too long, probably. It's seen more bad decisions than Nate's dating history. From the entrance, Nate whispered, unfair. Accurate but unfair. A small laugh escaped Mara before she could stop it. It broke the tension like a match struck in a cave. Atlas blinked slowly. For one fragile moment, the shelter no longer felt like a battlefield infirmary. It felt like a room where life had made a small, stubborn claim. Then Atlas shuddered, hard. Mara's hand went to his neck. Her face changed, his breathing's dipping. Becca's voice cracked through the radio. Talk to him. Keep him oriented. Calm, low voice. Don't overload him. Elias shifted closer, still careful not to pin Atlas. He placed his bare hand flat against the blanket near the dog's shoulder so Atlas could choose whether to move toward it. Listen to me, Elias said. Not to the wind, not to the trail, not to whoever walked away. Listen here. Atlas's eyes opened partway. Elias had not meant to say the next words. They rose from somewhere older than thought. I know what it is to wait for someone who doesn't come back. Sophia looked at him then. So did Mara. Elias did not look at them. His eyes remained on Atlas. I know what it is to keep hearing the last order after the voice is gone, and I know how heavy it gets when you think the whole thing is yours to carry. Atlas's breath caught once, shallow and rough. Elias swallowed. But not tonight, not a clue buried in snow, not a broken object, but a confession in the storm. Elias Rourke had not only found a dog who had been abandoned, he had found the living shape of his own old wound, breathing under a blanket, asking without words whether anyone ever came back in time. Sophia lowered her eyes. Nate stopped pretending to adjust the rope. Owen, outside the shelter flap, bowed his head as the wind moved past him like a hymn, with no church to hold it. Mara guided a little warmth toward Atlas, murmuring to Becca through the radio. No one rushed. No one spoke over Elias. Elias's hand remained open. Minutes passed. Atlas's breathing steadied by degrees. Not strong, not safe, but no longer falling away as quickly. Then, with an effort so small it might have been missed in any brighter world, Atlas moved. His black muzzle slid across the edge of the blanket until it touched Elias's sleeve. Elias did not move. Mara covered her mouth with the back of her glove. Atlas rested there, nose against the worn tan fabric of Elias's coat, breathing in the scent of the man who had stayed beside him through the storm. It was not trust in the easy sense. Atlas had been too deeply betrayed for anything easy. It was permission. Permission to help. Permission to stand guard. Permission to carry some part of what he could no longer carry alone. Nate cleared his throat. For the record, if he lives through this, I'm buying him the best steak in the county. Mara whispered. He's on a recovery diet. Fine, the best medically approved steak-flavored cloud in the county. This time, Sophia did smile, though only for a breath. Near midnight, the storm worsened. Snow pressed against the canvas. The temperature dropped. Command radio faded to static. The fugitive's trail disappeared under fresh powder, and Sophia wrote the delay into her notebook without apology. There would be no pursuit that night. No heroics. No foolish march into white darkness to satisfy pride. Atlas mattered more than speed. That was the decision, and it changed them all. Elias stayed awake while the others took turns resting in short, uncomfortable shifts. Mara checked Atlas again and again. Sophia reviewed the evidence by lamp glow, her face unreadable, but her pen moving with furious precision. Nate sat near the shelter entrance, rifle untouched across his lap, eyes on the snow. Owen listened to the forest and occasionally muttered insults at the winds as if it were a rude neighbor. Atlas slept at last, not deeply, not peacefully, but he slept without trying to rise. His muzzle remained near Elias's sleeve. The old watch lay between them, half buried in blanket folds, its black face catching a faint reflection from the lamp. Elias watched the second hand move. For years, that watch had measured what he lost. Tonight, it measured what had not yet been taken. Just before dawn, the wind softened. The forest returned in pieces. First, the dark lines of the trees, then the shape of the hidden camp, then the pale slope beyond. Atlas's breathing remained fragile, but steady. Mara checked him one more time and let out a long, quiet breath. He made it through the night. Elias closed his eyes, not in triumph, in gratitude. Atlas slept on, no longer straining toward the unseen trail. Not because the trail had stopped mattering, but because for the first time since the mountain had swallowed him, someone else was awake enough to remember it. Elias sat beside him until the first thin gray light touched the snow. He did not move his sleeve away. He did not take back the watch. And when morning finally entered the shelter, it found the old seal still keeping guard over the German shepherd who had nearly left the world, but had not gone alone. Morning did not break over the Bitterroot Mountains so much as seep into them. The storm loosened its grip by degrees. First the wind softened, then the trees became visible again, dark and patient beneath their burden of snow. The hidden camp under the pines looked smaller in daylight, less like a wound in the forest, and more like a place that had finally been forced to answer for what it had hidden. Atlas was alive. That fact moved through the shelter before anyone said it aloud. The German shepherd lay wrapped in thermal blankets beside Mara Chin, his black and gold coat still dull with frost, his breathing thin but steady. His amber eyes opened when Elias Rourke shifted nearby, though the dog did not try to rise. The old urgency remained in him, but it no longer dragged his body toward ruin. He had survived the night. For now, that was enough. Mara checked him with careful hands. Her face looked older in the gray light, her eyes tired but clear. "He stays here," she said. "No movement unless absolutely necessary. Becca and the veterinary rescue team are trying to reach the lower ridge once the trail opens." Elias nodded. "He's done enough." Atlas's ears flicked at the sound of Elias's voice. Sophia Ward stood outside the shelter, speaking into her radio. Her navy parka was stiff with frozen snow, and her red field notebook was tucked inside her coat like a guarded flame. She had slept little, if at all. The sharp lines of her face seemed sharper now, but not colder. Something in the night had changed the way she looked at the dog. "Command, this is Ward. We have a compromised prior operation, recovered K9 evidence. Possible missing handler, alive or concealed. An active fugitive trail continuing north from the hidden camp. Request support toward Black Elk drainage and the abandoned ranger station grid." Static answered. Then a voice confirmed, broken but clear enough. Nate Harrow rubbed his hands together and looked toward the pale slope. His gray knit cap sat low over his brow, the little blue patch crusted with ice. "Black Elk," he said, because apparently the mountain woke up and chose drama. Owen Pike had spread a waterproof map across a flat stone. The old tracker crouched over it, his fur-lined hat casting a shadow over his pale eyes. He did not smile at Nate's joke. He traced one gloved finger along a narrow ravine drawn in faded ink. "Black Elk Passage used to connect to a ranger station before the lower trail washed out," Owen said. "Most maps still show the station. Few people remember the passage." Sophia stepped closer. "Would Jonah know it?" "If he had a map from someone who did," Owen replied. Elias looked toward the evidence bag, holding a torn strip of fabric recovered from the hidden camp. "Let Atlas smell the cloth near the map." Mara's eyes narrowed. "Carefully. No pressure," Elias said. "No command. Just scent." Sophia hesitated, then gave a short nod. "Document the reaction. We are not using him as a tracking tool. We are verifying what the evidence suggests." Nate muttered. "That sounds like a sentence Sophia practiced in court." "It is a sentence that keeps us out of trouble," Sophia said. Mara brought the cloth downwind of Atlas, keeping it several feet away. Owen held the map flat. Elias stayed beside the German shepherd, one hand resting on his own knee, not touching the dog unless Atlas chose it. Atlas's nostrils moved. For several seconds, nothing happened. Then his eyes shifted, not toward the northern trail as before, not toward the camp. His gaze settled on the lower right corner of the map, where Owen's finger rested near a thin black line marked Black Elk Passage. Atlas did not lift his head fully. He did not perform some impossible act of understanding paper and ink. He only breathed in, caught the scent from the cloth, and let his eyes follow the direction his body remembered. His front paw moved beneath the blanket. Once. A weak press toward the map. Everyone saw it. Atlas could no longer stand, but the trail still lived inside him. Not as words, not as strategy, not as a miracle anyone could place in a report, but as memory, scent, and loyalty braided so tightly that even exhaustion could not cut them apart. Owen looked at Sophia. Black elk. Sophia folded the map. Then we go by the evidence. Mara touched the edge of Atlas's blanket, and he stays. Elias leaned close to the dog. Rest now. We'll read the rest. Atlas blinked slowly, as if the order had finally reached a place in him that could accept it. Sophia divided the team with precision. Mara would remain with Atlas at the sheltered site, maintaining contact with Dr. Becca Rowan. A marked rescue beacon would guide the veterinary team when weather allowed. Nate would stay on Sophia's shoulder for communications and local authority. Owen would read the passage. Elias would go as terrain consultant. No one argued. They left the hidden camp in single file. The Black Elk Passage began as a split in stone half buried by snow, then narrowed into a cold corridor where rock walls rose on both sides. Wind moved through it in low notes, not loud enough to roar, but constant enough to feel like whispering. The ground was uneven, iced in patches, and marked here and there by signs Jonah had passed through in haste. A scuffed boot print heavy on the left side, a torn bit of bandage caught on a thorn, a wrapper flattened beneath a stone. Jonah Vale was close. He appeared first as evidence, then as sound, a clatter of metal from beyond the passage. Sophia raised her hand. Everyone stopped. They moved forward slowly, not with cinematic aggression, but with the careful discipline of people who knew mountains punished arrogance. No one barked orders. No one rushed into the open. Sophia used the radio to update support, her voice low and controlled. The passage widened near an old ranger station crouched beneath the trees. The building was weather-beaten, gray wood and sagging roof, with one broken window boarded from the inside. Smoke did not rise from the chimney, but fresh boot marks disturbed the snow near the steps. Jonah Vale stood beside the porch, trying to force a small metal case into his pack. He was 44, tall and gaunt, with a narrow face hollowed by cold and fear. His pale blue eyes darted constantly, never resting long enough to look human. Brown hair hung dirty and too long around his ears. His beard was uneven, his lips cracked, and a burnt orange survival cord was tied around one wrist like a bright, ugly warning against the white snow. He wore a filthy gray climbing jacket, dark thermal layers, and mud-streaked snow boots. He did not look like a mastermind now. He looked like a man who had spent too many days running from both law and memory. Jonah Val, Sophia called, voice firm. U.S. Marshals, keep your hands visible. Jonah froze. For one moment, the old instinct to flee crossed his face. Elias saw it. Nate saw it. Even Owen, standing half-hidden near the stone wall, saw the calculation and the failure that followed. The routes were blocked. The passage behind him was watched. The woods beyond the station were too exposed. Jonah's shoulders sagged. You don't know what you're walking into, he called. Sophia did not raise her voice. Hands visible. He looked at Elias then, as if he could smell military history on him, the way Atlas had smelled the watch. The dog led you, Elias said nothing. Jonah gave a bitter laugh. That animal should have died miles back. Nate's jaw tightened, but Sophia spoke before anger could gain weight. Hands visible now. Jonah slowly lifted them. Support arrived minutes later from the lower trail. 2 county officers and a federal field agent, faces red from cold, moving with the relief of people arriving before a situation turned worse. Jonah was restrained without violence. The metal case was secured as evidence. Sophia read him his rights with a calm that felt more devastating than rage. But Elias was no longer looking at Jonah. He was looking at the station door. Something inside the building had knocked once. Weakly. Owen heard it too. Basement. They entered carefully after Sophia cleared the structure with the arriving officers. Inside, the ranger station smelled of old wood, damp canvas, and stale fear. A trapdoor near the back wall had been covered with a rug and 2 empty crates. Nate moved the crates aside. A voice below rasped. Atlas? The name stopped Elias cold. They opened the trapdoor. Clay Mercer lay at the bottom of the short wooden steps, wrists bound in front of him, his body wrapped in a torn green K9 training jacket. He was 47, lean to the point of sharpness, with a long face, cropped light brown hair, gray-brown eyes sunken from thirst, and a rough beard grown in during captivity. Even weakened, he carried a gentleness that did not look fragile. It looked practiced, like a man who had spent years earning trust from animals that could not be lied to. Elias climbed down first and cut the bindings. Clay gripped his sleeve with surprising strength. Atlas, he whispered again. He's alive, Elias said. Clay closed his eyes. The breath that left him sounded less like relief than a man finally putting down a stone he had carried through hell. I told him to hold the scent, Clay said, voice broken. I told him once, just once. I never told him to die for it. Elias helped him sit up. He didn't. Clay opened his eyes. Elias held his gaze. He lived long enough for us to find you. Above them, Sophia stood at the edge of the trapdoor, the torn Mercer patch sealed in evidence inside her coat, Jonah in custody outside. The old report already collapsing under the weight of the morning. Clay began to cry without sound. No one looked away. There were tears that belonged to weakness, and then there were tears that came when a man discovered a loyal soul had crossed a mountain trying to bring him home. Outside, Jonah Vale was led down the ranger station steps and into custody. Sophia watched him go. Then she looked back toward the basement, where Clay Mercer was being lifted into daylight. This time, she said quietly, the report will carry every name. 3 months later, winter withdrew from the Bitterroot Mountains like an old army leaving a battlefield. It did not vanish all at once. It loosened. It melted from the pine branches first, then from the high rocks, then from the narrow hollows where shadows had kept their cold secrets longer than the sun allowed. Snow became water. Water became thin silver streams running over dark stone. The forest smelled of wet earth, pine resin, and the quiet mercy of things beginning again. At the K9 Recovery Center below the ridge, Atlas learned how to walk without urgency. That, Dr. Becca Rowan said, was harder than healing muscle. Becca moved through the center with a teal veterinary coat over a gray hoodie, copper-red hair, cut to her jaw, thin-framed glasses slipping down her nose whenever she read charts too quickly. At 52, she had the sturdy warmth of someone who had comforted more wounded animals than she could count, and the sharpness of someone who had no patience for people who called loyalty training and left the heart out of it. He wants to work before he's ready, Becca told Elias one morning. That's not strength. That's habit. Elias Rourke stood beside the recovery pen, tan military coat open over his charcoal sweater, his old black-faced watch back on his wrist. The scratch on the left edge caught the pale spring light. He watched Atlas move slowly across the gravel path. The German shepherd looked different now. Not untouched, never that, but alive in the full sense of the word. His black and gold coat had grown thick again. The dark saddle across his back shone in the sun, and the gold fur along his chest had regained warmth. His deep chest had filled out. His amber eyes remained solemn, as if some part of him still listened for distant orders, but the emptiness had left them. The crooked little lightning mark on his forehead stood bright again, and the folded tip of his right ear gave him the look of a knight who had survived an argument with fate and had no interest in bragging about it. Atlas walked beside Clay Mercer. Clay was still thin, still moving carefully, but no longer looked like a man pulled from a cellar. His light brown hair had been trimmed, his beard shaved down to rough stubble, and his gray-brown eyes had begun to hold steady instead of flinching inward. He wore his faded green K9 training jacket and a black paracord bracelet on his right wrist, the one Atlas had recognized by scent before Clay had even spoken. Clay stopped near the fence. Atlas stopped with him. The dog looked up. Clay's mouth trembled once. I still don't know how to apologize to him, Clay said. Elias did not answer quickly. He had learned, late in life, that some grief needed room before advice came stomping in with muddy boots. Clay rubbed his thumb over the bracelet. I gave the command. Hold the scent. I thought backup was minutes away. I thought I'd be right behind him. You were taken, Elias said. I was his handler. You were also human. Clay looked toward Atlas. He nearly died because he obeyed me. Atlas leaned against Clay's leg then. Not hard, just enough that Clay had to feel the weight. The German shepherd did not look wounded in that moment. He looked mildly annoyed, like a judge hearing a foolish argument for the third time. Elias almost smiled. Seems to me, Elias said, Atlas disagrees with your conclusion. Clay let out a breath that was half laugh, half pain. Beyond the recovery yard, U.S., Marshal Sophia Ward stepped from a dark SUV with a folder under one arm. She wore her navy parka even though the worst cold had passed, and her black hair was tied low at her neck. Her face was composed as always, but the hard edges had softened in the months since the mountain, not weakened, refined. Nate Harrow came with her, carrying 2 paper cups of coffee and a brown bag he was trying very hard to hide behind his sheriff's coat. Becca saw the bag immediately. Deputy Harrow. Nate froze. At 39, with his gray knit cap now pushed back and his pale green eyes too innocent by half, he looked like a boy caught near a cookie jar. This is official law enforcement pastry. No bacon for Atlas. I never said bacon. You thought bacon. Nate sighed. That feels unconstitutional. Sophia ignored them both and handed Clay the folder. The preliminary indictment is filed. Jonah Vale is cooperating enough to damage people who thought they were safer than he was. Derek Sloan and 2 Gray Line contractors are named in the evidence suppression charge. Clay opened the folder but did not read. His hand went still on the first page. Derek wrote that I abandoned position, he said. Yes, Sophia replied. Her voice did not rise, but something in it carried the weight of a door closing forever. He also wrote that Atlas was lost to weather. The evidence says otherwise. The recovered tracker, the cut leash, the hidden camp, the timing discrepancies, and Jonah's statement all support deliberate abandonment and falsified reporting. Clay closed his eyes. Elias watched Sophia. She was not offering comfort the way Mara might, nor warmth the way Becca did. Sophia gave something different, a clean line in a dirty place, a promise that the record would not lie quietly anymore. Atlas will be named? Clay asked. Sophia looked toward the German shepherd. In every report where his name belongs. Atlas, hearing his name, turned his head. Nate lifted one hand in salute with the coffee cup and spilled a little on his boot. Becca muttered, heroic. Later that week, Atlas began his new work. No one called it work at first. Becca called it supported social rehabilitation. Nate called it Atlas holding court. Elias called it a dog deciding which humans needed supervision. The program served senior veterans from the valley, men and women who carried wars in their bones long after uniforms had been folded away. Some came with walkers. Some came with silence. Some came wearing jokes like armor. Others came with hands that shook when a door closed too hard. Henry Barlow was the first to sit with Atlas. Henry was 78, a retired Marine with a barrel chest gone soft with age, dark brown skin lined deeply around the eyes, and a white mustache trimmed with military care. He walked with a cane carved from walnut and had the suspicious glare of a man who had survived both combat and hospital food. Henry claimed he did not like dogs. Atlas listened to this claim for about 12 seconds. Then he walked over, lowered his large head onto Henry's knee, and released a sigh so heavy it seemed to accuse the old man of lying. Henry looked down at him. Well, Henry said gruffly, that's forward. Atlas closed his eyes. Henry's hand, which had been trembling on the cane, slowly settled into the thick fur behind Atlas's ear. No one spoke. Not Becca, not Clay, not Elias watching from the doorway. The dog who had once refused to leave a fugitive's trail now found another kind of scent. The quiet panic inside old soldiers who had forgotten how to ask for help. Atlas did not chase it. He simply lay down beside it until it stopped running. After Henry came Ruth Albright. Ruth was 81, a former battlefield nurse, tall even with her spine bent by age, with silver hair braided over one shoulder and blue eyes that still missed nothing. She wore lavender gloves and a wool shawl pinned with a small cross. She told Becca she was perfectly fine, then sat by the window and stared at the mountains for 20 minutes without blinking. Atlas walked to her slowly, not with the drive of a K9 on command, with the patience of a creature who knew the cost of being rushed. He sat beside Ruth's chair, leaving a respectful space between them. After a while, Ruth placed 2 fingers on his head. I once held a boy while he died, she whispered. Perhaps to Atlas, perhaps to the mountains, perhaps to God. Atlas did not move away. Ruth began to cry quietly. That evening, Clay found Elias on the porch behind the center. The sun was setting behind the pines, turning the wet branches gold. Atlas lay between them, front paws crossed, face solemn, as if guarding the entire valley from bad paperwork and poor snack discipline. I thought his mission was over, Clay said. Elias looked down at the dog. Maybe the mission changed shape. Clay nodded slowly. From finding a fugitive to finding the parts of people that got left behind, Elias said. For a long while, neither man spoke. The investigation continued beyond them. Jonah Vale was held. Derek Sloan's clean reports became evidence against him. Gray Line Response tried to separate itself from the men who had poisoned its name. Sophia made sure every recovered item was logged, every omission named, every false sentence challenged. Justice did not roar. It moved like spring thaw, steady, patient, impossible to stop once it began, and Elias changed too. He did not say this aloud, but he knew it. For years, he had lived with the private belief that somewhere in his past, he had failed to turn back fast enough. The dead did not accuse him. That was worse. Silence let a man invent his own sentence and serve it for decades. But Atlas had given him something no medal, no apology, no official phrase had ever given, a chance to return, not to the same battlefield, not to the same man. Time did not bend that kindly, but to the law beneath all service. When one of your own is down, you go back. One spring morning, Elias walked Atlas along the path behind the center. The air smelled of thawed soil and pine sap. Water ran over stones beside the trail. The mountains, once white and merciless, now stood blue in the distance, softened by mist. Atlas walked without pulling. That was the miracle. Not dramatic, not loud, not fit for a headline. A dog who had once dragged his failing body through snow now chose to walk at the pace of an old soldier. Elias stopped near the fence and looked toward the high ridges. "Ready to head back?" he asked. Atlas looked at the mountains for a long moment. Then he turned. Not ahead, not behind, but beside Elias. They walked home that way, shoulder to shoulder. There is an unwritten law between warriors and working dogs. It is older than badges, older than reports, older than the proud speeches people give after danger has already passed. If a soldier falls, the dog will search. If a dog falls, the soldier must return. And if the world tries to erase a faithful soul from the story, those who still understand honor will walk into the cold and bring that soul home. Elias rested one hand on Atlas's neck as they reached the porch. Atlas leaned into him, calm and whole enough for the morning. The greatest missions do not always end with the capture of a guilty man. Sometimes they end when a loyal heart finally learns it, no longer has to walk alone. In the end, Atlas did not teach us only about loyalty. He taught us about the quiet kind of courage that keeps going when no one is watching, when no one is coming, and when the world has already decided to forget your name. Sometimes, the greatest miracles do not arrive with thunder in the sky or light breaking through the clouds. Sometimes, God sends a miracle on 4 tired paws, with a wounded heart that still remembers how to love, how to serve, and how to believe that someone is worth finding. Atlas was abandoned, but he did not become bitter. Elias was wounded by the past, but he did not turn away. Clay was lost, but he was not forgotten. And somewhere in that cold mountain wilderness, Grace walked quietly beside them all. Maybe that is the lesson for our own lives. We may not be climbing frozen mountains or chasing dangerous men, but every day we meet people who are tired, lonely, or carrying burdens no one can see. Sometimes the most powerful thing we can do is simple. Stay, listen, help, and refuse to leave someone behind. Because love is not always loud, faith is not always easy, and loyalty is not proven when the road is warm and clear. But when the snow is deep, the night is long, and the heart still chooses to keep going. If this story touched your heart, please share it with someone who needs a reminder that goodness still exists in this world. Leave a comment and tell us where you are watching from, and if you believe every loyal soul deserves to be brought home. Subscribe to the channel for more stories of courage, faith, and the unbreakable bond between humans and dogs. May God bless you, protect your family, comfort every wounded heart, and guide each of us to become the kind of person who never walks away from those who need us most.